You walk into a room and you immediately feel uncomfortable. The room isn't dark or necessarily spooky in nature, but the source of this dread are the many vintage dolls set up along the wall, staring at you with their beady, soulless eyes that shine in the light.
Let's go!
Some of them have a forced, perpetual smile across their face, while others wholly expressionless, staring blankly. Or, maybe one of them is doing a weird TikTok dance in a very threatening fashion.
Crazy. It's insane, right?
We're probably all familiar with the situation. Okay, maybe not the dancing one, but interacting with eerie dolls in general. Whether it happened to you in real life, because maybe your grandmother collected way too many porcelain dolls, or you've seen something like this depicted in films. Let's face it, dolls can be creepy. And for me, scary versions of these toys were a source of many nightmares when I was little. Even though I'm now obsessed with horror movies, I was once at a point where I couldn't even watch a commercial for a scary movie with a doll or a puppet in it because their faces would be ingrained in my mind and later return to terrorize me in my dreams.
Hello. Are you watching me on YouTube? Good.
In fact, I think that fear was induced by a late-night sleepover viewing of Poltergeist when I was about 7. I mean, that clown doll?
No! God, please, no! No! No!
Anyway, dolls are a part of many of our childhoods. Whether you had a plush one, or a Barbie, or Bratz doll, or an action figure. They are something we can all relate to in some fashion. And despite them being meant to bring joy to children and adults, a few variants of them have become synonymous with horror movies. There are several horror icons that are dolls, like Chucky, Annabelle, and puppets like Billy from Saw. M3GAN also just came out and is proving to have some staying power and excellent memeability, showcasing a new doll enhanced with AI. Well, technically she's a robot, but a robot doll nonetheless. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit as a fun horror movie with some surprisingly thoughtful moments. But why do these toys have such a capacity to strike fear in our hearts? Does M3GAN exemplify that to become a new horror doll icon for the next generation? Dolls can be a source of terror and anxiety, as pediophobia, or the fear of dolls, is a legitimate phobia that can cause real distress. As horror movies prey on this type of fear, I wanted to look into the origin of the scary doll antagonist, why dolls frighten us in the first place, and how Hollywood has portrayed dolls to maximize that fear. Do newer horror dolls have the chance to even compare to the likes of cult classic figures like Chucky? Leave a comment below telling me which evil doll is your favorite, or maybe which one especially creeps you out. First, let's talk about the origins of the creepy doll trope in horror films. They had their beginnings with puppet-themed movies back in the time of black and white film, where ventriloquist dummies were used to frighten, by way of the chaotic energy put into them by their puppeteers. The Great Gabbo, all the way back in 1929, played with the idea of ventriloquist dummies being sentient, as the protagonist almost solely used his puppet as a way of expressing emotions. But it was a movie of the musical drama genre, not really a horror movie. Then, in 1945, The Dead of Night takes that idea further, with ventriloquist Maxwell and his dummy Hugo. At one point, the dummy seems to have a mind of its own, when it exclaims that it wants to switch owners and be the dummy of new ventriloquist Sylvester.
You're sort of teamed up with him, aren't you?
I'm just about through with that cheap ham anyway.
The doll even bites Maxwell's hand, and seemingly does whatever it can to achieve this goal. It's shocking and introduces the doll element to the horror genre in a memorable way. The Twilight Zone had an episode involving a talking doll, so now by the 1960s, the genre was moving on from ventriloquist dummies to children's dolls for this type of horror. The aptly named Living Doll episode from 1963 had a sentient doll named Talkie Tina, that yes, talked, and not just pre-recorded sayings. She would say nice things to Christy, the little girl she belonged to, and bad things to her mean stepfather.
My name is Talkie Tina, and I'm beginning to hate you.
The stepfather tries to destroy the doll, but not even a saw can hurt it, implying that she might have some sort of supernatural powers. Eventually the doll trips him, and he falls down the stairs, apparently dying from his injuries. From here on, dolls become more common in horror. Later, a clown doll, yes that one, was in 1982's Poltergeist, and a few years later, our current resident king of spooky dolls made his debut in 1988, Chucky.
Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end.
In 2004, Saw used Billy the Puppet as its mascot for the series of films, forever associating him with the brutality and gore. In 2013, the Conjuring franchise introduced Annabelle. James Wan, the horror giant behind many doll-themed movies, actually referred to the poltergeist clown doll as what helped him discover his obsession with evil dolls and puppets in scary movies. And now M3GAN has recently been released. There are so many more movies than just these that use dolls for their antagonists. It's safe to say dolls are everywhere now in horror, and even warrant their own subgenre. So what really made dolls the perfect addition to the horror genre? What fears do they tap into? There are a few key factors that make dolls terrifying. Possibly the main cause is their strong resemblance to humans. Vintage dolls are especially the stuff of nightmares.
Oh, I'm offending the toys? Excuse me!
Back in the day, many porcelain and plastic dolls were actually made for adults, as collectibles, and therefore were more sophisticated looking, meaning they were molded to look more human-like than the playthings we're used to today. This made them reside in the uncanny valley, where something is so human-like that it creeps us out because we know it's not really alive. As for their expressions, well, old dolls' faces were often deadpan, and as humans we tend to rely on ever-changing facial expressions and other physical cues to communicate with others. A blank expression can be unnerving. On the flip side, a doll with a smile might even be worse. A never-ending smile is unnatural. They seem to be mocking us constantly, and in horror movies, well, maybe one of the worst things you can see before you die is that horrifying smile. Another key feature of their expressions that make them creepy are their constantly wide open eyes. They are always watching you, like one of those haunted paintings with the shifty eyes that follow you. A doll could be sitting patiently in your bedroom, for example, watching you as you sleep, when you're at your most vulnerable. They are awake even when you aren't, and that can be a chilling realization. Now sure, we know dolls can look sinister, however they are not a real threat to us in our reality. But in comes the twist horror movies add to these dolls. What if the doll could actually move when you aren't looking? What if they could do a little dance? Move from room to room, or stab you, and stab you, and stab you? Well, you get the idea. If a doll could move and had some sort of evil intention, they could easily kill you in your sleep at the very least. In horror movies, dolls are given some sort of life and movement to become a real threat to the film's characters and a greater object of our fears. Of course, dolls don't really have a way to fully move on their own, so any movement and talking with no evidence of technology to help them imply that the doll is either haunted, possessed, or sentient in some way. A ghost, spirit, demon could be possessing the doll to do their bidding. This would cover horror dolls like Annabelle and Brahms in The Boy 2. Not the first Boy film, since the doll had no actual sentience in that one. Chucky is a little different than the rest, but still fits in the category since it is Charles Lee Ray's spirit inhabiting the doll. M3GAN is a doll, and technically a robot, with AI and advanced robotics that help her become self-aware, increasingly intelligent, and obviously violent.
You should probably run.
Unlike the rest, dolls like Brahms from the first Boy film and Billy have no sentience to them, with both of them being controlled and moved by a human character. Whether it has life via spirit, demon, or robotics, and depending on what the doll in question can do, increases its scare factor. For the abilities of these villains, some of them solely have the ability to move, while others have more substantial strength and even supernatural powers. Out of all the dolls I've mentioned, Annabelle is probably the most powerful. She basically has the power of a poltergeist. She can float, make objects like books throw themselves at her target, make her spirit appear, and terrorize her victims with visions and physical torment. In fact, her kills are pretty gruesome too, from seemingly sucking the life out of someone to tearing them literally in half. Besides Chucky having the ability to move his soul into objects and humans because of his voodoo magic, he doesn't necessarily have any of the characteristically supernatural abilities like Annabelle does, even though he does seem to have some significant physical strength, so he can fight normal-sized humans.
How could a little doll possibly be so strong?
Chucky cannot make himself fly, or make his victims hallucinate, or move objects he's not physically touching. Charles Lee Ray basically possessed a doll, but doesn't have the typical powers of a ghost or demon, aside from being extremely hard to destroy, which is a trait many evil dolls seem to have in common. Chucky does have the highest body count, but he's also a serial killer who just kills for fun, contrasting the other dolls since they all have very specific targets. And no, I'm not counting Jigsaw's body count for Billy since Billy didn't technically kill anyone. M3GAN definitely gives Chucky a run for his money in terms of lethality. She has a titanium core, meaning she can take a hit, or two, or a hedge trimmer to the face. It also makes her stronger than the average human when attacking. Her intelligence is also unmatched, since she has access to advanced learning via AI and anything she can look up on the internet. As for Billy and Brahms, they are definitely our least threatening since they have no autonomy. In this case, these two dolls are not themselves inflicting physical damage on anyone, but are associated with bad things happening to the victims. Like I mentioned earlier, Billy isn't possessed in any way and doesn't do much physically. He is simply used as a messenger for Jigsaw. Brahms in the first movie has no abilities at all, and in the second he seems to be possessed, but doesn't really do much compared to all our other doll antagonists. Some dolls are scarier because of their abilities, but visually all these dolls have great designs to keep their faces in your nightmares. Some are more traditionally designed, like Annabelle and Brahms, who resemble vintage porcelain dolls. Billy is a play on ventriloquist dummies, which to me has always freaked me out. I mean, their mouth is like the worst, really. Chucky is a more modern doll design, so it doesn't have that innately creepy old vibe, but his design is more relatable to the dolls we might have interacted with in our childhood. M3GAN is also a newer design, but so realistic looking that it hits that uncanny valley the most of all. Overall, these dolls are made to scare us from the second you see them in a teaser trailer. These designs, paired with their horrifying actions and supernatural and technological powers, transformed all these dolls into memorable movie villains. Dolls like Chucky, Annabelle, and Billy have become icons of the horror genre, and for good reason. We have come a long way from ventriloquist films of the 1920s. Not saying that a ventriloquist dummy isn't fearsome, because they definitely are. M3GAN is a great new addition to the subgenre. Not only was the movie well executed, just like all of M3GAN's kills, but it managed to balance scary, campy, and serious throughout. It takes its own modern spin on the doll trope by fitting it right in today's technology-obsessed society and increasingly advanced electronic toys we let our children play with. The M3GAN movie also tackles the fear of technology, and specifically robots overpowering us in the future. And with AI rapidly evolving before our eyes, it could be more relevant now more than ever. Her design is intimidating, and her abilities terrifying. Chucky will always be my friend till the end, but I hope horror fans let M3GAN join the club as a fellow memorable doll icon. It's ironic that a toy doll, something typically meant for children, can so easily be used as nightmare fuel in film. Horror movies really love ruining our childhood, and I wouldn't have it any other way.